And we're back. It's 6 o'clock in London. It's 1 p.m. in New York, 1 a.m. in Hong Kong, 3 a.m. in Sydney, 10 a.m. in San Francisco, and 10:30 at night in Mumbai. Greetings, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where in the world you are today. My name is Patrick L. Young. The IPO-VID live stream series 20, episode 2. That's episode 116. Starts here. And of course, we're back from our summer holidays, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you had a fantastic time during the course of August. As we're returning to those live shows after the summer break, we've lots to catch up on. Of course, all of the stories were in Exchange Invest and indeed our Substack, devoted to the crypto DLT market structure, BitCarnage. First up was the deal that many thought would never happen, but Exchange Invest never wavered in our support and belief, and neither did ICE, ensuring that the FTC ultimately came in from the cold and supported the ICE acquisition of Black Knight. I've no idea why you would bet against the Intercontinental Exchange completing a deal, other than in the unfortunate instance where, for example, a deal gets rumoured, probably in that case by the target, such as the eBay transaction. And sadly, the stock market analysts all saying what a disaster it will be when they broadly lack the vision of Sprecher and Associates Inc., which is why they're not a $60 billion company and they are stock analysts. Anyway, exciting news, ICE Black Knight. The deal has closed and the mortgage revolution continues in the USA. Meanwhile, in career paths, fabulous news during the course of August. Many exciting changes of position. 2 outstanding movements we're going to highlight from Exchange Invest during the course of the last month. Ulf Axman, the man with the golden Rolodex, has returned to the parish as the Chief Commercial Officer of Expiry. That's the exciting cloud-based vendor who you may remember have appeared previously on IPO-VID. And indeed, IPO-VID alumnus from episode 73, the author of Financial Cold War, which is an Exchange Invest book of the week as well, James Falk. He's been appointed Chief Commercial Officer of the Central Bank of the SAR of China in Hong Kong, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. Good luck to you both, gentlemen. Really excited by what you can manage to do there. Meanwhile, we've had a deal done in South America, Nuamex. There's a new brand for the merged exchanges of Santiago, Lima, and Colombia, Nuamex. Good luck to CEO JP Cordoba and the Nuamex team. It has to be said that when it came to branding, Nuamex does sound somewhat different, but then again, amalgamating the first syllable of either the cities or nations merging from Santiago, Lima, and Colombia ends up ultimately producing some sort of an amalgam that sounds a little bit like one of those medicines that are featured on primetime US news time advertisements. Thus, the new American exchange is encapsulated elegantly in Nuamex. Over in BitCarnage for the past month, Binance has assured us everything is cushy, although I do see they've had a bit of a tech outage overnight, while the US CFTC have made a strong showing de facto banking day fee, as we had long predicted in BitCarnage and Exchange Invest that the DeFi revolution is never going to come to pass, at least not in the places where legal systems actually happen to be functioning. Now, I guess today is someone we had on the show previously. Rainer Zitelmann is here to talk about the wealth elite. Rainer is a German historian, sociologist, and multiple best-selling author whose 26 books include In Defence of Capitalism, which we enjoyed discussing just a few months ago. Ladies and gentlemen, after this show, drop in wherever you're watching this, Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, and catch our discussion of In Defence of Capitalism, a fabulous book altogether. Rainer's books have been translated into 30 languages around the world, along with his copious quantity of op-eds. So, having talked to Rainer on May the 2nd, 2023, how apt we were speaking after the Pan-European Day of Indolence, the World Socialism Master Day. We had IPO-VID 104. Here he is, back 12 episodes later, and we're going to be discussing the wealth elite. Rainer, great to see you back again. Where in the world are you today?
Now I'm in Berlin.
Well, it's good to see you back in Berlin. It's actually quite ironic because you were in Berlin all those weeks ago when we first talked. You're back in Berlin now, but you've been pretty much frantically traveling and remain so through the course of the end of the year.
Yes, exactly. Last year I've been in 17 countries and this year in 15, but it will be much more. Thursday I go to the Netherlands and then I go to Bulgaria, Albania, and then I will go to China, Nepal, and then a South America tour with Colombia and Argentina and Chile and Paraguay. So it's a lot to do this year, but now I'm in Berlin.
That's fantastic. Sounds like a very, very exciting year. Still to come, even as we're only heading into the fourth quarter of the year coming up. Let me say hello to Lee Ball. Evening, Patrick and all from a damp and drizzly Derbyshire. Lee, it's lovely to see you. Thank you very much for checking into the show. I hope you will enjoy this evening's exciting episode. So, Rainer, one thing actually I want to mention. First of all, we were talking about this off air. You were just about to launch it. You got a fantastic video you put together, another of your documentary series, Poland from Socialism to Prosperity. Now, I know we're going to be talking about the wealth elite, but actually, if you don't mind, let's segue into that. It's a terrific video on YouTube altogether. And I do believe we might have a slight problem there. I think has Rainer frozen, or maybe he can't hear me.
No, I can hear you.
You can hear me.
I thought you want to show a video now.
No, I'm so sorry. I wasn't going to show the video. I do apologize, Rainer. You were sitting there so inscrutably. I thought the screen had frozen.
No.
My apologies. No, so tell us a little bit about this video, because it's something that everybody should watch, definitely.
Yes. By the way, you can find it for free on YouTube, Poland from Socialism to Prosperity. And the story is this: Poland was one of the poorest countries in Europe in the 80s. Very, very poor, even poorer than the Ukraine. And the GDP per capita was half of the Czech Republic. So really very poor country. And then they started with economic reforms in 1990. They had a famous finance minister and vice prime minister, Leszek Balcerowicz. He's a true believer in capitalism, in Ludwig von Mises and Friedrich August von Hayek. And he started free market reforms. And now, since 3 decades, Poland was Europe's growth champion, and standard of living increased so much. And I think it's very important to tell these lessons, especially to young people, because today socialism is in favor again, and you hear very often how bad is capitalism and that we should think about a kind of planned economy or a kind of socialism. And here in this film, you see what planned economy really means, and how capitalism can improve the living conditions of ordinary people. And it's such a great success story. The bad thing is, I have to add, that since 2015, since this Peace Party came to power, they go more in the wrong direction. Less market, more state. They stop privatization. Even they nationalized some banks, and more redistribution. So it's more a story about these great 25 years from 1990 to 2015. And I hope it is a reminder also for people in Poland what made them so successful, and a great story for young people. This is the second film that I produced. The other film, you can find it also for free on the internet. It's Life Behind the Berlin Wall. I compare East and West Germany, and I'm proud because last year I got an award for Best Short Movie at Freedom Fest in Las Vegas in the United States. So these are 2 films you can find for free on YouTube.
They're fantastic, both of them. We discussed the Berlin Wall film last time. I can remember well being a very young child camping by the Berlin Wall in the mid-1970s. And it was quite incredible to think that this amazing division had fallen across the continent of Europe. Poland, of course, absolutely agree with you. Leszek Balcerowicz, actually born in Torun in Poland, the same city as my wife is from, and indeed where we have some investments. And I've got to say, the only bit I would probably quibble about is, yes, the last decade of government has definitely seen a turn to the left, but I actually think that the PO government, even around about the time of 2010, had already effectively given up on actively espousing capitalism. And I think that's where the rallentando was allowed to set in, because they became much, much more interventionist at that point in time. And certainly Balcerowicz is a great man. I wish I could get him on this show. He always says he's far too busy, which is such a shame, because he's truly one of the great figures and probably one of the greatest finance ministers of the 20th century. Absolutely incredible, his legacy altogether. The video is terrific altogether. Absolutely a must recommend, ladies and gentlemen. Catch it, Poland from Socialism to Prosperity, and you will be able to see that free on YouTube, and I believe the links have already been distributed. Let me just say hello to Peter Second. Hello, Peter. I hope you and Ari are doing really, really well and enjoying the show. Great to see you back and watching. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, if you've got a question for Rounder Zitelmann during the course of this evening, let us know. We'll be delighted to include that question, because we're going to be talking about this fascinating book, which is, you know, the whole thing about the wealth elite. And let's talk about that for just a second and show the cover of the book, The Wealth Elite, because where did the idea come from to do this study of the rich?
Yes, first I wrote another book in German. It's not translated in English now. It means like how to grow and stay wealthy. And writing this book, I looked for scientific research about the topic how people become rich. And of course, there are thousands and thousands of books all over the world, self-help books, how to grow rich. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. But I found out that there's almost nothing really, scientific. It's more like opinions or self-made book, but there's not much scientific research. But I found one doctoral dissertation in Germany. It was based on a poll with 470 wealthy people about how they become rich and about their personality, but they were not really rich. The median net worth was 2 million, what is not, of course, really wealthy. And I contacted the professor where this doctoral dissertation was written, and I met him and I asked him, what do you think about the idea to do something also as a doctoral dissertation about people who have more, at least 10 million or most later it was more than between 30 million and 1 billion. And I asked him, what do you think about this? The problem was, of course, that it's not possible to do a quantitative research because there's not a sample from the larger population where you have enough people who have a net worth of some hundreds of millions. So you had to do something that we call in sociology qualitative research, based on in-depth interviews with these wealthy people. And I asked him how many people, what is the minimum I should have to find for these interviews. And he said, yes, it's like 25 people. It should be 25 people. And in the end, I found 45 people. Then I stopped it because I saw it's repeating every time a similar story. So this was the idea, because there are, I think it's a crazy thing. There are so many people all over the world who want to grow rich, who want to become wealthy, but there's almost no scientific research about this topic. It's even easier to find a doctoral dissertation about, yes, I saw something about the heartbeat of a pig during a 100-meter race. There was a doctoral dissertation. About the life of rare insects, and so you find doctoral dissertation about a lot of topics, but there was almost nothing about personality traits of wealthy people. And so I started. Of course, the problem is the difficulty that usually these people, they don't want to spend their time to give interviews. They are a little bit suspicious. There's a sociologist, maybe it's a left-leaning one, who want to harm rich people or only want to find some confirmation for his stereotypes against rich people or so. But I knew some very rich people because I was in the real estate industry for 15 years, and so I knew some of these people. And if you know some of them, they know other people, and when they trust you, they lead you to their friends. And this was the way how I made contact to these 45 people, and I spoke with every one of them between 1 and 2 hours. And in the end, the transcriptions filled 1,700 pages. So a lot of stuff for my analysis. And in addition to this, I asked everyone to complete a psychological test, the so-called Big Five test. And I think this was the first time that something like this was done. And so the book was first published in Germany, then in this English version that you have, but it's very successful now in 3 countries, in China, in South Korea, and in Vietnam.
Isn't that interesting that the countries that it's very popular then are, well, one country which is already remarkably successful, South Korea, and has certainly reached post-developed status, but nonetheless is driven by incredible ambition everywhere around the country. Fascinating that it's driven in China so well for sales, but I think that reflects an incredible driven ambition that's going on. I mean, you look at the transition of Hong Kong in the last 20 years, where now the one thing you can say is when you meet someone who's from mainland China in Hong Kong, the one thing you're aware of is it's taken them 3 times as much effort to manage to get to Hong Kong, and they're probably therefore twice as clever and twice as hardworking as even the Hong Kong Chinese, who have never been known for being slouches at any point in time in their lives. It's really, really interesting. And Vietnam, such a fascinating, dynamic place to have flipped from total socialism, where they won a war to defend their socialism, not quite 50 years ago, and now has a reputation as a throbbing free market center.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with all of this, what you've said. And by the way, I commissioned a poll, not this poll about capitalism, but another poll about the attitudes toward rich people. And we've done it now in 13 countries. And one of the questions was, how important is it for you to grow rich? And the interesting result is in these Asian countries, on average, it was 58% who said it's important for them. And in Europe and the United States, it was only 28%. So there's 30 percentage points between Europe and the United States on the one hand, and these Asian countries on the other hand. And especially, and also, yes, what you said about Vietnam. The funny thing, I was invited there last year. I spoke at 4 universities in Vietnam, and one of those universities was the Foreign Trade University. And they read my books, especially one book. It's the title is The Rich in Public Opinion, and they did their own research, and then they invited me for a workshop, and the topic of the workshop was, how can we improve the image of rich people in Vietnam?
Wow.
So, but I was never invited in the United States or in Europe to a university. How can we improve the image of wealthy people? So it's a great contrast.
It's a very interesting one. Yes, I'm always fascinated by the American university system. On one side, it's this huge money churn machine trying to get endless amounts of endowments out of people in order to manage to support the university. And on the other side, it seems to be a huge, very hyper-liberal institution which seems to hate the rich, which I've never quite understand how those two manage to tolerate each other, let alone continue to exist. But yes. Then again, I'm not sure. I read something which was very interesting, which was a review of The Wealth Elite by an American publication. And what I loved, which encapsulated something very interesting there, was they said, what's shocking is the richest people are not correlated according to the quality of their education. And
Yes.
I thought that was a fascinating pointer. Talk to me about it.
Yes, absolutely. I spoke with every one of them about their biography, about their education. And one of the questions was how they were at school, whether they were good or bad about their grades. And some of them were very good at school or university, but some of them very, very bad. They even had no high school. So there was absolutely no correlation between their education or between their performance at school or university on the one hand, and their later financial success on the other hand. Even some of the most successful people, one of the wealthiest people there in my research, were very bad at school. So this was not an important factor. What was much more important, what they did outside school, alongside school. I asked them, for example, how did you earn money when you were at school or university? And when I was young, I was a student. Most of the other students, when they earned money, they worked for an hourly wage, or some of them worked as taxi drivers, or some of them in a restaurant, or even in a factory. But these people, these wealthy people, for them, they didn't work for an hourly wage, but most of them were engaged in early entrepreneurial activities, especially in sales. So they sold so many different things. They had so many ideas what to sell. And I think this experience in sales, this was one very important thing, much more important as their grades at school or their performance at the university. This was one thing. The other thing that I asked them whether they were competitive athletes, and half of them were competitive athletes. And I think this is also important because in Germany there are not so many people. I think in the United States it's more common if you're at university that you do something like this, but not so in Germany. So these rich people were much more engaged in competitive sports. And I think it was important because they learned how to win, but much more important, they learned how to deal with when they win and when they lose. And I think this was very important. So these were two things that a lot of them had in common. These very, very early entrepreneurial activities, especially in sales, and then that a lot of them were competitive athletes when they were young, much more important than their performance at school and university.
That's absolutely fascinating. And in fact, I think it probably crosses across one question that we've got coming up in just a second. Let me just add a couple of comments and a comment and a question from our audience. Mary says, good evening, everyone. Amazing Poland documentary. So congratulations on that. You've got another fan there, Rainer, from Mary. Thank you very much, Mary. And thanks for watching the video. It's a great video altogether, both the Poland one and indeed the Berlin. Having walked the division of the Berlin Wall in the center of Berlin, it is truly an incredible story of the difference between central planned disaster areas and the opportunities of freedom and the free market. Now, Lee Ball, he's therefore asking a question. I think you've partly started to address this, but there's more I'm sure you can say. Rainer, which trait did you find the most popular with the very rich, and how did they spend their spare time?
To be honest, I didn't ask them exactly this question, but I asked them another question that is maybe related to this question, and I think the answer will be very interesting. I asked them, what do you associate with money? What does money mean for you? And I had there, I think, 7 or 8 categories. For example, to buy the fine things like, expensive cars and mansions and expensive vacation, but also other things like it means freedom or being independent or being admired. So there were different things. And the interesting thing is, yes, there were some people, maybe 1 out of 3, for whom it was very important to spend money for these expensive cars and things like this. But there were more people for whom this was not really important, and there were even a lot of people who were really absolutely not interested in these things. Some of them were even, I remember one, he was even upset a little bit when I asked him about it. Go on, next questioner, that guess why? He told me he was only 1 time in his life in vacation, and he never bought a shirt that was more expensive than $30. So you find very different people. It's if you watch TV, you see always the rich people with their expensive ships and cars and houses and drinking champagne and all this. Of course, this is what people want to see if they watch TV, because I think it would be boring if you look in the daily life of most of these rich people. You would see maybe a conference room where they sit together with other people having a conference or writing some emails and making some telephone calls. I think to watch things like this would be boring for a lot of people, and it's much more exciting to show them with their expensive cars. But and of course there are some people like this, but it's misleading if you think that this is true for all these rich people or even for the majority. There are people like this, of course, and we even know it, from in addition to these interviews, of course, I read a lot of biographies and autobiographies about wealthy people, and they are very different in this way. Let's take 2 of them as example. We all know, I think, that Warren Buffett is famous for spending I think he lives still in the same house, and he had the same car for decades or for more than 10 years. I think you can't imagine him, Warren Buffett, to have expensive ships or cars or a lot of pretty young girls on his side. I think this is not. On the other hand, for example, I read a fascinating book about Larry Ellison from Oracle, and he was this kind of playboy and with all this expensive ships and things. By the way, the title of the book, I remember it. It had a very funny title. The title was "What's the Difference Between God and Larry Ellison?" And then there was an asterisk. God doesn't think that he's Larry Ellison. This was a funny title of the book. So you see, rich people, of course, they have some things in common, but of course, as with poor people, they are not all the same. But what was really important? The most important motive when I asked them, what do you associate with money, or what does money mean for you? For most of them was being free and independent. This was much, much more important as a motive than these luxury items. And I think even for me, I could understand it, but even for me, I have a nice, car, a Bentley, and here a Cartier watch, but this wouldn't have been motivated me to earn money. But what really motivated me, it was exactly the same, and so I could understand these people. It was financial freedom, and my definition for financial freedom is whether I work, where I work, what I work, with whom I work. It's only on me. If I decide now I stop working totally for the rest of my life, of course I wouldn't do it. I love it to work. I could do it. And if I would decide to live wherever I want in the United States or another country, I could do it. And so I think this is freedom, because most of the people, 95 or maybe more of the people, they have to work to pay their bills or their rent or their mortgage or whatever. And I think this is a financial freedom, that you work because you love to work, but you don't have to work, and that you have no boss. Okay, maybe you have a boss. Your clients, the client is always the boss. Your market is the boss. But in addition to this, maybe let me add one thing. In a lot of cases, these people are difficult people. They are non-conformists, and sometimes they have difficulties to come along with other people. So for them, it's the only thing to become an entrepreneur or to become wealthy. Think about someone as Steve Jobs, for example, who was fascinating and inspiring, but on the other hand, we know he was a very, very difficult person and got conflicts with almost everyone. The same was true with Bill Gates when he was young. Very, very difficult person. And for these people, it's one of the few possibilities to grow rich, to live the life that they want, and without having any boss.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's fascinating. It's really interesting. And we're going to get back to that for a moment. But I'm aware of the fact that you've been talking a lot so far, Rainer. So I want you to have a little drink and an opportunity to rest. And we're going to talk about our book of the week, because actually, first up, recently, we've just started during the course of our summer break in presenting certificates to everyone whose book has been featured as a book of the week. And one of the first batch was none other than Rainer Zitelmann's In Defence of Capitalism. We dispatched the certificate last week. We're delighted to recommend this book to you. It is absolutely magnificent, and indeed also The Wealth Elite, which I have a suspicion, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be a book of the week in the near future, as we're looking towards what we will feature during the fourth quarter of this year. So congratulations to Rainer. Congratulations to everybody who's been a book of the week so far. You should have received a certificate in your inbox. And that moves us elegantly on to this week's book of the week. And it's a thrilling tome altogether, written by a good friend of mine, also an alumnus of this wonderful show, IPO-VID, Brendan Bradley, very well known as the former Chief Innovation Officer of Eurex, the German futures exchange. He was our guest on episode 85. ESG Investing for Dummies provides a user-accessible guide to investing for a more sustainable world. This book, according to its own blurb, this book will allow us to hit this new investing landscape running. Presumably that's a collision taking place in a suitably, sustainably violent way, I would hope. Anyway, if you're seeking measurable ways to factor ESG into company performance, this is an excellent starting point. I thoroughly recommend Brendan's book. And our next book of the week will be unveiled in Saturday's Exchange Invest Weekend Edition. Drop by exchangeinvest.com. It is absolutely free to read the weekend edition, which is more macro topics about things like wealth, riches, commodities, you name it, whatever interests us that we can find around the world, in order to manage to bring you some interesting and often offbeat and indeed sometimes slightly controversial, we don't claim to agree with everything we publish, reading, but it's all thought-provoking. And don't forget, if you want to have some thoughts provoked during the course of the week, if you're looking at the world of market infrastructure and the exchange of information, as we call it, Exchange Invest can be yours for only $349 per user year if you want to keep up with everything that's happening in the bourse business. And don't forget also, if you're more interested in just the crypto side of the ledger, then BitCarnage is on Substack, and you can subscribe to that via the usual Substack channels. Now, Rainer, it's very interesting what you're talking about here. All of these character traits of people. Tell me something. Roughly, what was the division of people that you talked to across both geography and their kind of age span?
To be honest, these were all German people. Some of them lived in Switzerland and one lived in the United States, but they were all from Germany. And of course, most of them were older. now in the last decade, it's easier to grow rich in a few years as someone as Larry Page or Sergey Brin or Zuckerberg. But I had more this old-fashioned entrepreneurs, and in former times it took you in most cases some decades to grow rich, not only 5 or 10 years, but some decades. So most of them were rich, and only one was female, one was a woman, but I think it fits if you look at this lists of the wealthiest people in the world, for example, the Forbes list or the Bloomberg list. You see also, if you look at women there, in almost all cases, these are widows or daughters, heirs from male entrepreneurs. And so I think it was not a coincidence that only 1 out of 45 of my interviews was female. All others were male.
And it's very, very interesting, given the fact you're saying that all your interviews were with Germans, because I suppose as foreigners, we always think of Germany as being a state where there's a high level of conformism. I mean, Germany, and indeed one could also mention many other places, Singapore, China, etc. But it's incredible that you mention how important non-conformism is. Do you think that was especially difficult for German entrepreneurs, given the way that the country is relatively structured?
Yes, maybe, but you should be aware that Germany is one of the countries, if you look as a percentage of the population, with the most millionaires and wealthy people on the world. Of course, there are some countries where you have a higher percentage, smaller countries as Singapore or Switzerland, for example. But if you look from the bigger countries, there are only very few countries with such a high percentage of very rich people as in Germany. By the way, what a lot of people don't know, another country is Sweden. I was in Sweden 3 weeks ago, and I learned that the percentage of billionaires in Sweden is 60% higher than in the United States, just the population, of course, because in Sweden there are only 10 million people who live there, and the United States is 340 million. But yes, non-conformism, of course, yes, there are two things. First, this picture about German people, very, they obey all to the rules, and with a lot of conformism. Maybe it's a little bit an old-fashioned picture like Germany was maybe some decades ago, but it changed a lot of things there on the one hand, and of course on the other hand, it's a minority of people, the rich people, and they are different to most of the people. And I think you know it also from investment. I think it's logical. If you do the same thing as everyone else, you can't be a multi-millionaire or even billionaire. You yes. have to do things different. And we spoke before our interview. We spoke about Jim Rogers. He was not yes. one of my interviewers, but I know him in person. You know him in person, and he told me a funny story about non-conformism. Let me share you this story because I like his story. He told me when he was young, he lived in Manhattan. Today he lives in Singapore, and he was invited to a fancy dinner, and he was the youngest. All the others were much older than he was, bankers, investors. And then one moment, one of these older bankers said to his neighbor, "How can someone be so stupid and buy locker chairs?" You know, this producer of aircrafts.
Yes.
Because they were in trouble at this time. Every day there were bad news. The stock price decreased and collapsed, and every day bad news in the newspapers. And one said to his neighbor, "How can someone be so stupid to buy it?" And everyone laughed very loud. And for him, it was not funny, for Jim Rogers, because he was the one who was
the one.
so stupid who bought it. But he told me later on he made a lot of money with especially this investment. And he told me lessons learned, the louder they laugh at you, the better it is. He's an example for nonconformists. Of course, it's not a guarantee to become rich.
No.
You always, the country, it would be too easy. And, if everyone says 2 plus 2 is 4, you can say it's 5 only, to be a nonconformist. But Jim Rogers, I think, in a way, it's crazy. I remember some years ago, I met him in Singapore and I asked him, where would you invest right now? What do you think? What's the really the best idea? And he said, I think I would like to invest in North Korea. I think this is the best idea. You see, he's really a nonconformist. Let me tell you only a second funny example about nonconformism. I spoke with someone who's one of the richest people in Germany. His name is Theo Müller, and he made his money with milk and yogurt, especially.
Yes. Müller Light.
Yes, exactly. He has net worth around $5 billion, so he's one of the richest people in Germany. Wow. And his favorite animals, of course, are cows, because he made his money with milk. And then he told me this funny story. He told me, imagine there's a herd of cows going along a path. And on the left hand, there's a very green and lush field. And on the right hand, there's a field that is not as near as lush, only with some grams of grass there. And what happens? 99 out of this 100 cows go to the left side, to the left field. And what happens? The grass is eaten very fast. And only one cow goes to the right side. And this cow eats and eats, going on to eat, while the others have no. And he told me, I'm the cow going the right side.
That's quite fascinating. No, it's very interesting. I mean, listening to their anecdotes and their stories of all these people, it's also fascinating how people made and do make so much money out of assets that people wouldn't necessarily think are hugely important. I mean, we spend so much time talking about you have to be in technology or you have to be on the internet or something. And yet you look at so many billionaires who make their money out of fabulously old-fashioned enterprises like milk, yogurt, things that have been around since effectively the dawn of time. It's really interesting.
Another friend of mine, he was also one of the interviewers today, is a friend. He has net worth of 3 billion. His name is Wild, and he became rich with Capri Sun. I think you know this drink.
Yes, juice, yes.
Capri Sun, also old-fashioned. By the way, it was funny when I met him. I spoke about what I'm doing research about wealthy people. I said, "What do you mean with wealthy? I don't think that I'm really wealthy." Hey, but I think you have like 3 million net worth. Yes, of course. But look, there are others who are really wealthy. Like look at Warren Buffett, for example. These people, and I'm only number 650 on the list of the wealthiest people in the world. And only there are 650 others, and they are the really rich people. And what I learned from this, I had to remind him that there are 7 billion people who have less than he has. But these people, they don't compare with the others with this 7 billion, but they compare only with people who are richer. And this is also what I learned is fascinating. Even people who have 100 million, or I had a discussion because the subtitle for my book was The Psychology of the Super Rich. And then one of these people who has maybe only $50 million, and he told me, this is a misleading title. What means super rich? There are only people like me, some people who have only 50 million. This is not super rich. And I agree in a way, but for ordinary people, someone is wealthy even if he has 2 or 3 million. And if someone has 50 million, he is super rich because this is only a very, very small percentage. I think there are only some hundreds of thousands of people in the world from 7 billion who have a double-digit million net worth. So, of course, there's not a there's not a definition for what means super rich. Everyone has another idea. But I thought that if you have, for example, even if it is only 10 or 20 million, then if you make not totally nonsense with this money, you can make your living from the from your investment without touching it.
Yes, and it's also actually a very interesting point I was thinking about earlier that you were talking about. And indeed, I want to just say thank you to Lee Ball for a very interesting point. He's talking about perhaps the opportunity to wheel and deal in armored trains out of North Korea being a potential export, as Kim Jong-un, of course, has arrived in the Russian capital, Moscow, today by train. It's an intriguing issue when you look at also what fascinates me with Germany is, I mean, Germany has not been historically, because it's a large nation, geographically a very big place. Okay, it's got a lot of people, 100 million people, but there's a lot of space, and therefore property has not necessarily been ridiculously expensive. Whereas you compare it to that little bolt hole around the south of England, where absolutely everybody virtually ends up being a millionaire as long as they can afford to pay their mortgage off, because that's the value of the entry level of property. Very interesting to hear how much concentrated wealth there is in Germany. I'm actually beginning to wonder if that's possibly not also because they don't have the same capital cost of just buying themselves homes and property as they're working their way up. And you can buy really, I mean, perhaps not in downtown Berlin or wherever, but you can buy magnificent properties in Germany at very, very reasonable prices compared to, say, the south of England or certain other very, very hot to trot locations, like, for example, where Jim is in Singapore.
And what's also different, I saw it in Sweden now. In Germany, since 1996, we have no wealth tax. We have high income taxes, and even in Sweden, they have higher income taxes. But in Sweden, they abolished the wealth tax, they abolished the inheritance tax, they abolished the gift tax, and this was a very important factor that today you have so many really wealthy people in Sweden. And in Germany, it's since 1996 that we have no wealth tax, and I think this is also another factor that is important.
Very interesting, which I suppose then leads me to the interesting question. I mean, if you're looking at these really wealthy people, in the case of most of the people you've talked about, they don't seem to have been very mobile. And what I mean by that is, we talk about a lot of the super rich, and a lot of the super rich in the, I suppose, the tabloid vision, they're often people who've moved halfway around the world. They're in different places. They're in very glamorous places. Whereas it seems to me that a lot of the German mega wealthy are actually living remarkably close to where they were born and brought up. Relatively few have left the country. It's quite fascinating.
Yes, but those who left, they left for Switzerland,
right?
Especially for tax reasons, especially inheritance tax. So there are a lot of Germans who live now in Switzerland. Also, I mentioned two of my interviewers, Theo Müller and Hans-Peter Wild. I'm allowed to mention their name. They were confidentially. I guaranteed them not mentioning their name, but these two allowed me to mention their name, and both of them live in Switzerland and not in Germany. And yes, but it's true, and there's also another difference. In Germany we have very envious people. I did another research in 13 countries about the image of wealthy people, and I calculated something that I call the social envy coefficient. So to compare how envious are people in different countries. And the most envious people were in France, number one, and followed by Germany, number two, unfortunately. And on the other side, people who are not as envious are in Poland, for example, Japan, and Vietnam. And I think this will harm a society if I think successful entrepreneurs. Of course, I speak about people who made in an honest way. their money. They should be role models, but in a lot of countries, especially in Germany, there are more scapegoats. They blame the rich and the super rich for all the bad things that happens in the world. And I read a book few weeks ago from Bernie Sanders in the United States, and the title of the book was "It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism." And he has one chapter, and the headline of this chapter is "There should be 0 billionaires in the United States." But what did it mean? If you look all around the world, where's a country with 0 billionaires? It's Cuba, it's North Korea, and some very poor African countries. There you have, if you look at the Forbes list, there you have 0 billionaires. But all countries, successful countries, where people have a good standard of living, of course, there are a lot of billionaires, as in Singapore or in Switzerland, or I mentioned Sweden and countries like this. So the idea to have a country with 0 billionaires, it means to have really a poor country. And this is what this was the topic we discussed last time, what anti-capitalists, what they don't understand. They believe in something that I call zero-sum belief. They believe that rich people become only rich because they took it away from the poor. And that it is crazy. You see, if you look, for example, the development of poverty, 200 years ago, before capitalism, 90% of the worldwide population lived in extreme poverty. Today, it's less than 9%. But even in the 80s, 43% of the worldwide population lived in extreme poverty. 43%. The same time when the number of billionaires, poor people decreased, the number of billionaires increased. In 2000, we had only 500 billionaires all over the world. Today, it's 2,700 billionaires. And the reason is the same. It's economic growth. In the moment when you have economic growth, there are always more rich people. Today, you have almost so many billionaires in China as you have in the United States. And 2 years ago, I read an article that there are even more billionaires today in Beijing than in New York City. And at the same time, the number of people living in poverty decreased in China from 88% 40 years ago to less than 1% today. So, okay, this is not a topic, but it's a misconception about, I think we need wealthy people, and a country as the United States should be proud to have so many billionaires, because most of these billionaires became rich as successful entrepreneurs. And if you tell some people we want to have 0 billionaires, it means we don't want to have so many successful entrepreneurs. This is the same thing.
Yeah, no, I completely wholeheartedly agree. Just a quickie from Lee Bell. I'm not sure, Lee Ball, sorry. I'm not sure we necessarily it's on topic, but he's just curious, why do you think so many Germans prefer to rent or lease their properties rather than buy outright? And does that have any impact on wealth?
Yes, this is correct. By the way, some weeks ago, we had a new research. Usually we think there are only less than 50% of people in Germany who own their own property, and most of them rent there, so more than 50%. But there's a new research, and they had some methodological, new aspects. Maybe these are more than we thought. Yes, but I think in Germany we have, in a way, it's better to be a tenant than to own your own apartment, because they are protected by the politicians sometimes I think in a crazy way. So even when I had some investments in real estate, and I had bought my first apartments to rent it to other people, I lived as a tenant at this time. So even me. And later on, I bought my own villa, and now I have 2 apartments here. But this is kind of luxury.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. Well, I mean, unfortunately, we're kind of running out of time because there's been such an active and fascinating discussion altogether. I know that usually my last question would be, where does the revolution go next, the capital market revolution? But you answered that elegantly. So let me ask you this. Where do you think, Rainer, the wealth elite goes next?
I think in a lot of countries, we will have a lot of economic problems with economic growth. And, you know, the growth of the wealth elite and the number of wealthy people depends, of course, on economic growth in general. And I see a huge problem that today in almost all countries, we go in the wrong direction, less market, more state. I spoke about China in this interview, and China was, we know it all, so very, very successful, starting with Deng Xiaoping's free market reforms and introducing private property. But now with Xi Jinping, they go in the other direction, more state, less market. And of course, you see the same in the United States. When you look what Joe Biden does with his Green New Deal, more and more state intervention. And in Europe, of course, Germany is only one example. We go more and more in the direction of a planned economy. And of course, this will have effects for entrepreneurship and for our economy as a whole. So, but we don't know how history develops. Sometimes we have, even this is what I hope, positive surprise that things happen that you haven't thought about it before. So I'm to be honest, I'm more pessimistic in the general economic outlook for a lot of countries. But on the other hand, we have a lot of really hardworking and inspiring entrepreneurs that have also always new ideas. And if the government makes it not too hard for them to achieve, they will make their way. And this was even what Adam Smith, who had his 300th birthday in June, what he wrote in his famous book about the wealth of nations, that even when the government and the state harms the economy, and even if they do so many crazy things, that there are always, entrepreneurship people who are successful in spite of this.
And on that note, thank you very much, Rainer Zitelmann. It's certainly a mixed message at the moment, thanks to government interventionism around the world. We've been talking about the wealth elite today. Next week, we've got a terrific show. We're going to be going from the city to space with one of the grandees of the Corporation of London. He's a common councilman there, Mark Wheatley. You'll catch that at the same place at the same time. Let me just say, before we wrap up this show, thank you very much to all those who interacted today. Thank you, Lee Ball. Thank you, Peter Second. Thank you to Mary. Go watch those videos of Rainer's. The one about Warsaw is absolutely fantastic, about the Polish economy's miraculous growth, Balcerowicz, the miracle, and all of that. And once you've had the miracle on the Vistula experience, economic version, then don't forget to check out his fantastic video comparing and contrasting the Berlin Wall. Rainer, I really hope that we'll get a chance to catch up again in the near future. Your ideas are always super illuminating. It's fascinating to have you on the show. Thank you for being our guest today, and thank you for making a seamless show. To our production team, to Jamil, Marianne, and Racy, you've done a great job today. My name is Patrick L. Young. Join me during the week at exchangeinvest.com in order to discuss the exchange of information, bourses, the epicenter of market capitalism, and of course, also in BitCarnage, talking about cryptocurrency and the related derivatives market structure for the whole derivatives ledger, distributed ledger rather, I should say. And of course, you can catch us in an Exchange Invest weekend at the weekend, where we'll be talking about all sorts of things, and it's free, exchangeinvest.com. My name is Patrick L. Young. Thank you very much once again, Rainer Zitelmann. This has been a terrific show. Catch you next week, and I wish you all a great week in life and markets.